Hi, Jill. I'm really happy to have you here today. I want to really understand your story. And I mean, we know each other since many years, which is great. And we have worked together, and you have helped me a lot to understand WPP and, what's going on in the system. So, we know each other from Walk the Talk, a program that we have developed for WPP that is running since 2016 to
Yeah.
bring lots of women to the top. I think we are succeeding. I dare ask what the latest figures are, but I think we're doing well. And we're going, I
Definitely.
mean, how many women are at the top now? I don't know. Is it a full, is it already 30, 40%? Or it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
impressive.
There are different metrics depending on which bit you look at, but
Yeah.
all the metrics have improved ever so slightly, which I think is an achievement. Absolutely.
And I also remember that there was a notion at some years ago where it was like, shall we not do this anymore? Do we need that? And I know you really put your foot down to continue so that
Mm.
we continue working with women. I know that you are the WPP ambassador for women, which is an amazing title. I
Very
also
grand title, but basically it just means that I am officially our female supporter. That's how I like to see it.
And you definitely are, because I know you're flying overnight to our programs in New York and you're there all day, and I don't even know how you do it. But we want to tell your story for Shine, but also for She Can, and really understand, we want to know a little bit more about yourself and also how you got to where you are today.
Well, I'm always happy to talk about people's stories. That's my favorite thing. As you know, I do our executive hiring here. And when I interview people, I'm only interested in their story, really,
Mm.
because, what they do is always interesting, but the kind of golden thread to their careers is just fascinating. So always happy to talk about it. So, I started my career, or the sort of meaningful part of my career. I had lots of Saturday jobs and kind of, holiday jobs. And I knew I had a good work ethic, and I think that's always important. But I started my career with a major corporation, with Unilever, and I had the opportunity to work with incredible people as obviously very junior, but the way that they worked was, a lot of rotations. And it's given me a kind of lifelong belief in the importance of ideas, but also in the kind of discipline that you need in order to make something come to life. Because when you are, a manufacturing and marketing company, having an idea is one thing, but delivering it, and if you think about the complexity of the supply chain, is a different matter entirely. So I always have that ability to kind of think of good ideas, but then also how will they come to life? And after that, I had specialized really in communications, and I was approached, I guess you would call it headhunted, but it was a different era then. I was approached to join a PR firm, which was slightly different, but was what I wanted. So I joined what was Hill Knowlton, and that's obviously one of our businesses. It has now become Burson, but was a very significant PR firm. And I had 10 really happy years there. I became managing director of a large division, and I learned so much, but we also had a lot of fun. And that's been one of the kind of joys of my career, has always been having a really fun time alongside really hard work. Um, and then, and this is the kind of central tenet of my career. I just always think about what will come next, but have some real substance in years in what I do in that moment. So I became really fascinated about people and talent, and how you can make a tiny change to a team and everything changes, and how a client can be unhappy and then become really happy again. Um, and I thought, this is all about people. It's about motivating people. It's about giving autonomy to people. It's about, having high standards. And I decided, and this is the most crazy part of my career, that having never ever done an executive search mandate in my life, we would, with a partner who had equally not done this, we would set up a specialist headhunting firm for our business. And I suppose, really simply put, we monetized our network. We thought about all the people we knew, where the gaps were. We knew that it needed a bit more discipline. We also needed a bit more kind of, insight. And we just set forth. And honestly, I had tiny children. I had big commitments. So I don't really know what came over me, but nonetheless, it was all okay. We had 10 fabulous years doing that. We had a great reputation. It was kind of one of those clients used to refer to us as their best kept secret. And that's kind of quite nice. So I did that, as I say, for 10 years, an interesting time because I was also bringing up my family then. And I do have a great deal of sympathy for people doing that in today's work environment because it's so hard.
Yeah. And did
And
it give you the flexibility that you needed at the
yeah,
time?
yeah, it really did. Even though we were working really, really hard, as you know, running a business is not for the faint-hearted. It did mean that I could drop my children off at school, pick them up, take them on their play dates. They're very sporty boys, so I was always rushing around, various football pitches and running tracks and all of those sorts of things. But I felt connected with them too, which is so important. And I did that all the way through their sort of developing years. And then WPP, kind of, who was a client of my business, approached me to come and do what I do here. And actually,
Yeah.
my goal was to kind of expand beyond comms and PR, which is exactly what I've done. And it's been really, really good. And another kind of long, happy period.
Lovely.
That brings you up to speed.
Yeah, I know. So what matters to you most, or what are the main learnings or takeaways to date of your impressive career?
Well, I think that the thing that I'm quite pleased with myself about is that I have now had 4 decades of working through my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, and now into my 50s. And I think, actually the work that I did with you in terms of attending as an observer, I guess, the walk the talk programs really helped me get clear on what my values were, and they have been really, really consistent. So that was amazing for me at that point to be able to get them clear. And so
Hmm.
that has been what's driven me all these years. So I guess what's important to me is generosity. It's a really strong driver that I have, giving time, giving attention, giving more than you receive sometimes. Just always having that spirit is number one for me. Um, Definitely a certain amount of conscientiousness and discipline, because I think sometimes it's easy to think of a long career as just something that happens, but it needs a lot of discipline also. So that's definitely important as well. And then I think quality, that was something that the work that I did with you made me really realize that for me, doing things really well, with purpose and consistency is so important. And I really mean that in terms of my engagement with people too. So I think those things are what really count. But I think the process of establishing that was so valuable.
And what are you really proud of?
Um, I think, probably simply put, still finding ways to be relevant
Hmm.
and finding that golden thread through the various iterations of my career, I think is probably what I'm proud of for myself. But when I look at all the people that have worked with me, alongside me, for me, I see all of them still going strong. Not every single one, obviously, but many, many, many are still going strong. And when I think about the women in particular and all of the challenges that women face building a long career, I just think good for us all, right?
Yeah,
We've all driven
absolutely.
through. And I think, being a good role model is important in that sense.
Absolutely. And what, I mean, especially now with our geopolitical
Yeah.
challenges that we are facing, I mean, what are your current challenges and how do you overcome them? And I'm not only saying you personally in your life, I'm saying as well dealing with all the change, dealing with
Yeah.
everything happening in the world.
Yeah. So again, I think it goes back to a couple of things. So firstly, I've always prioritized deeds over words. So it's
Mhm.
easy to say things, but it's much more important to do things. And I think we can continue to do really good things. What we
Yeah.
call things, what we say, one thing, but what we do is really important. And that's why, for instance, when, we were running in the US, our program, I did commit to come over for a very, very short time because I wanted to show our commitment to our women in deed, not necessarily words. So that's really important to me, that we continue to do what we should do, in the ways that we can.
Mhm.
And that, sure, it is a challenge. I think women, though, now face, lots and lots of challenges. And I think it's really important that we continue to highlight those, to continue to talk about those things. Women, I think, have to, and it's a common, expression, but they have to parent like they don't have a job, and have a job like they're not parents. And these are really difficult. People have such high expectations for performance in all of those areas. I think mothers can be very judgmental of other mothers, which I find really frustrating. Let people be who they are. And all these
Mm.
kind of difficult conversations that women have about other women, and judging them for their choices, I just find abhorrent. And I think, I like to try and encourage people just to, you do you. That's my favorite expression. And just be
Mhm.
happy and confident that you've made some good choices, grinding through some of those challenging times, get there. Because now I'm in my 50s, I have no responsibilities at all aside from my work ones. And I suppose keeping my husband happy from time to time, but he's very relaxed about what I do work wise. So we have a very happy, fun life. And I think, getting to this point where I can be so committed to my work is really a glorious thing. So yeah, it's happy days.
That is amazing. So did you have your children quite young then?
I did have them quite young,
Yeah,
yeah.
and they're nice. It's good
So they're
choice.
they're off the spreadsheet, Anna, as I like to say.
Not something I can say at all. But I love what you just said, because I have a now priest lying next to me, working next to me, living next to me, Heidi, and she went to Oxford. Then she had 6 kids, and now she is a vicar. And she found me once crying in the garden, being completely overwhelmed by everything, and
Mm,
probably crying for the right reasons. But she just looked at me and she said, "You can only be you, Anna. Stop saying I should have done that, I shouldn't have done that." She says, "You can only be you, and you are a good role model, and you tried your best. And it's not like just because it hasn't worked, out the way you wanted to, that then there's definitely something wrong with you." And I see that a lot with the women we work with, that there's so much guilt, there's so
mm,
much shame, there's so much blame. And I'm one of them, and it's interesting, that we do that to ourselves, that we are so hard on ourselves. I mean, talking about women being to other women, but I find that we women to themselves are the hardest. And these gremlins we talk about at
yeah.
the talk, and we're only touching the surface so that people are just aware of them. But that's a life's work, it will just never disappear. And I can see that with me. The minute something happens to one of my children, I feel like I'm to blame, or I have to run, or I have to help, or I didn't help, or, it's very interesting.
Cool. Yeah, I had a very intelligent mother. She was very well educated for her era,
Yeah,
particularly, and she worked, and she never felt an ounce of guilt. Which I think, because she had to struggle so much to be, taken seriously as a
yeah,
woman in her era, she
yeah,
absolutely had no time for that kind of introspection and guilt. And I think I must have absorbed a little bit of that, because I used to say to my children when they were complaining about things, I used to say, be proud you have a mother who works, makes money, makes life fun. So I try really hard not to have that negative self-talk. And that's
yeah.
what I mean about when I talk to other women. I try and just get them to accept that they're not going to be perfect in all areas, but with discipline, with good humor, and with, you know, a lot of desire, you can get through all of those tricky areas.
Good. I will note that in my head. So what would you like our listeners to take away from your story? What do you think is the gift, you know, of this interview?
That sounds like a really big thing to say. I don't know that I have any gifts as such. I think actually the one thing that, you know, the word pivot has become career pivoting, has become a bit of a thing. And I love that because I think everyone should think about their pivots. You know, I think I always look at it as a cousin. So, you know, I mean, if I had any choice in life, I might become a florist. You know, I love flowers. I love that creative process. I love the smell. I mean, truthfully, I wouldn't like to get up at 5 a.m. and I don't like the cold, so it wouldn't work. But the point is, I see that as a silly idea, but I like to think of cousins, so things that are related to what you do, but take you in a slightly different direction. And I think that's a really valuable gift that you can give to someone is if you want to think about a career from a longevity point of view, then think about what you might do where the low-hanging fruit is kind of there, but it gives you growth and it gives you that sense of moving in a new direction. But there's going to be some kind of golden thread, which for me was people, but for other people might be different things.
Yeah, I like that. And if you had one message for the world right now, what would that be?
An even bigger question, Anna.
Not listen to the men who are making a lot of noise right now, a lot of
Yeah.
noise
Well,
reproducing
oh my
themselves.
goodness. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, obviously we are in difficult times, but I think if you think about, you know, decades and decades of work, then you will see that there are always difficult times. So I think, you know, being compassionate and understanding that, you know, your point of view is not necessarily right, listening to people and leaning into different points of view in a non-aggressive way, I think is, you know, my approach. And then in terms of a more, you know, down to earth kind of Jill-like point of view, I think just enjoying what you do is so important. I see people very, very worn out and frustrated sometimes. And I think try and find the joy because the joy is what will propel you along.
I like that. Thank you, Jill. That was lovely. So thanks a lot for your time and
You're
thank you for being
welcome.
on She Can. And
Oh, thank you
yeah,
for
lovely
inviting
to
me.
meet you today.
Thank you so much.